Hello. Last two lectures we discussed the infrastructure and its planning elements for physical infrastructure and social infrastructure. Today we will discuss the broad methodology of making a housing strategy plan for a city. So, before we go to the main content of today's lecture, let us tell you that why we make the housing strategy. I mentioned you that in a master planning or city planning exercise, basically at the end of the exercise we show how the city will grow with broad road network. Major roads are shown and the land use profile is also shown, major land uses which we discussed in last few discussion. And apart from the land use, we also mention density, gross density, and after that we for every sector, like every infrastructure, water supply and the transportation, or every type of infrastructure, we allocate resources based on the population. But we told that after the city planning exercise, if the city is very big and the vast area is allotted for different kind of uses, so it is not sufficient to for the master plan or the city development plan to come into the action. So, before coming to the action at the each and every plot level or the ground level, we need to make detailed planning for each sectors, each components of the plan. For example, housing itself is a big sector because it takes substantial land element in a city, 50 to 60%. So, and other than housing, the infrastructure like road, it takes around 25%, 20 to 25% of a city. And apart from housing, all the utilities including water supply, sewerage, everything, all those takes much area. So, we need to develop the sectoral plan or detailed master plan for each and every component related to infrastructure or land. So, one of the very important component is the housing strategy. The basic objective of the housing strategy is that we make a detailed planning. So, basically the housing strategy specifies the details of utilization of land based on the future housing requirement of the city. In a city planning exercise, we project the current population, and based on the future projected population, we allocate the bulk land or the gross land as a gross residential land use. But in housing strategy, we specify the detailed utilization in terms of typology, in terms of its build form, everything of the land as per the future requirement. Now, based on the future population, we estimate the future requirement of the housing. Then we take this exercise after the master planning, I told you, and similar time frame, if the master planning or the city development plan is done for 5-year plan period, similarly the housing strategy can take the same time period, and it enables the city authority to take action at the ground level to develop housing, irrespective of the implementer, whether it is a private sector or public sector. The city authority can take action because the whole picture is ready. It is a clear cut roadmap of the city authority or the housing development. So, city authority can take action. So, now what are the basic stages? So, we have simplified the methodology of preparing housing strategy into 7 simple steps. This is a generalized methodology I am going to explain to you, but it can differ from city to city or context and regional area to area. So, first steps, what we do for the housing strategy, like any planning strategy, what we do is study of a existing situation. A given city, a city is given to you as a planner, and you take the city and you study each and every element of the housing component, what is their existing scenario. So, study existing situation. Now, what exactly we study in the existing situation? Basically, we study the first of all we estimate the current housing stock. So, current housing stock means combining every categories of the housing, you have to assess the what is the current housing stock and what could be the estimated shortage. Then we try to identify. So, this is a quantitative parameter of the as a whole for the city, that what is the total housing stock, and with the description and classification. Now, based on that we make the housing typology, housing typology. For example, we discussed that there are various typologies where broad classifications were formal, informal and organic. So, based on the broad classification what we discussed earlier at the beginning of the course, based on that every typology can be identified and not and after that the quantity also can be estimated. That is the second stage what we need to. We are going to assess the typology wise the housing situation, housing quantity, its present condition, problems, issues and trend. And apart from that, after housing typology studies, we have to study the land profile. So, in the land profile we have to take account of the land availability, now the land availability data may not be available every time. So, the one of the major initiative could be that to take the existing data from the government department. Usually land registration departments are the responsible department to have the land data. So, you can take that data and you can update that data with the site features with the current survey input, because those maps may not be updated as per those could be the older maps. So, you should update that map with the current input, and you can also utilize the input of the satellite data imagery. So, land availability based on the basically land map, then satellite image, and also you can take survey inputs. So, after this basically you are going to get a clear picture of the city, that what are the lands available at the city under which ownership. Maybe you will find that some lands are owned by private agencies or private people, or some lands could be owned by the public authority like municipal corporation or any public authority. So, that identification is very, very important. The second part is the study of land value. So, based on the government circle rate, or maybe the current rate from the ground through the survey, you can take the exact account of the land value for each and every parcel of the city. Now, for every parcel of the land value, you may not get that data exactly. So, what we can do, we can demarcate the zones where the land value differs, and for each based on the variations we can take similar zones where the land value is more or less same or the similar. So, identifying of those zones of the land value, high, medium and low, or the in between that or very high land value, and identify those pockets, and we can mention that land value. So, land value and land availability, this will be prepared in a spatial map and with a register. So, both is required, one is map, another is the register. So, in the map basically you have to provide zone wise land value data. This two figure is important to make a land profile. Apart from the land availability and land value, there could be other parameters like land profile, physical profile, topographical profile, that also you can take into account. Topographical and plus land cover. For example, you might find that some part of the city area is covered by the forest area. So, even if it is owned by the government authority, it may not be utilized for the future development. So, because it is a protected land or reserved land. So, those kind of information should be taken into our exercise as a land profile data. The next thing what you have to do is, so we have studied the housing stock as a whole to estimate the total housing as of now today, housing typology, the land profile, and then we have to take account of the another very important resource, what is that is called the finance. So, finance available at the public sector, private sector and others. So, basically it is very difficult to estimate that how much finance is available, but definitely you can give a try to estimate the potential investors. So, for this you can take an account of the existing real estate portals or real estate market survey organizations reports, and all those relevant reports are also, in addition to that reports, you can also conduct field survey from your side to identify field surveys and interviews with the prospective agencies or stakeholders to identify or assess the potential investors. What basically the objective of this assessment is to identify or assess the potential investor from the private side. You will find that if the land value is very high, that means the city as a whole or some of the parts of the city as a whole is having high development potential. So, developers will be keen to invest on those area. So, you can take an account or the preference from the developers or the other agencies that where they will be willing to invest their money to develop the future housing development. Similarly, the NGOs and some other similar organizations can be interviewed or taken in the board to discuss and to assess their willingness to contribute in the housing in the fields of like slum improvement or some other housing like core city housing. So, those kind of willingness of the people or the stakeholders to invest in the any kind of housing that need to be taken care of. And then finally, you have to take in account or the stock of the present organizational capability. In terms of the organization, whether the organization is ready or is capable enough to execute large projects, whether the organization is capable enough to appoint various kinds of private investors or private developer, so that they can go for joint venture or affordable housing for the partnership schemes or various kinds of schemes which can be possible through joint venture mode or public private partnership mode. So, those kind of assessment need to be done at the institutional level. What we do basically, we take the stock of the institution, we take their manpower availability, whether they have the technical manpower or not, we see their organizational profile, the decision making process, and based on that there are accepted tools by which we can assess the capability of the organization, whether they can take up the further action out of this exercise or not. So, after this exercise we will be able to tell that what are the gap basically in the organization in terms of manpower, in terms of finance, in terms of legal or any institutional reform. So, this is the first stage of the housing strategy exercise, what we are doing, telling it as a study. So, here study is the keywords you should remember in your that this is the first stage, very important stage for a housing strategy. The second part, based on the study, we are very much clear about the city profile and the city profile of the housing, what kind of housings are there, the land profile, financial profile and organizational profile, and what are the basic problems and issues. So, here after the quantity we are also identifying the problems and issues of every component of the housing, and we are identifying problems and issues for the organization as well, problems and issues for the land, finance, every sector. So, second exercise or second stage will be to frame a basically vision, that for housing strategy what kind of housing typology, what kind of housing goal we are going to achieve. So, this will come to ultimately aim and objective. So, this becomes a second exercise where the key words is vision or aim and objective, the second stage. So, the visioning exercise could be done in a participatory method using the opinions and feedback of the elected members, using the opinions from the stakeholders like private stakeholders, people who are residing in this area, people who want to migrate and want to stay there. The third stage, so this is the first stage of a study of the housing strategy, second stage is the visioning exercise. The third stage what you have to do is what we call as a analysis. Now, what kind of analysis will be required for making a housing strategy? The first analysis is required to for this housing strategy is the estimation of housing demand. So, based on the total housing stock and the future projected population, we can establish the gap of the housing stock for the present population and for future population, and that will be the housing demand. So, this is the first thing what we have to based on the this will be based on the projection. The second analysis which we have to do is the basically the trend analysis of the housing typology, the what kind of trend is visible in that city, what type of housing typology is preferred by the people, that is need to be studied. So, trend or preference need to be studied through the interviews, through the surveys, at least at this sample level for each typology. So, based on the trend and preference we will be able to tell that what are the housing typology preferred by the people and what could be the future direction of the housing development towards that housing typology. The next part will be the analysis of the land availability. Now, based on the land availability and land value maps what we already have prepared, if we can superimpose both the maps and we can come out that what are the land, what are the amount of the land available in the high land value area, what are the land available in the land pockets are available in the medium land value area or low land value area. So, similarly following that we can make a matrix of land availability and land value. Our objective is to capture the land value before any planning intervention or before any infrastructure provision, because land value is a very important part in housing strategy and housing development. So, land availability as per the land availability map and the land value both has to be studied, and at the end of this analysis we have to make a plan having showing the pockets of land available as per the every kind of land value as per the market study. The next stage will be that the possible financial investment. Possible investment, so estimation of investment from the data. So, this kind of, and for organizational we can make a SWOT analysis, strength, weakness, opportunity and threat. So, this analysis will tell the strength of the organization, weakness and what are the opportunities and challenge for the organization. So, after this analysis, so this is the third stage we are making for this housing strategy. So, after this the analysis, we are clear about the estimation of housing demand, the trend of the different kind of housing. We might end up that we can see that some of the housing typologies are not preferred by the people, some of the housing typologies are much preferred by the people. Those kind of cross cutting preferences need to be figured out here in this process. Then the land availability, land value, possible investment and SWOT analysis. So, after this analysis, we need to make a kind of a synthesis of the analysis data. So, what kind of synthesis we do here? So, in the synthesis we make basically the supply demand matching, because we have already estimated the demand for the housing. So, at the demand side we have housing, land, finance. At the supply side we have to see that what are the land is available, finance is available and how it is matching with this or not. Therefore, considering now here, let me take an example. For example, in a city of any city, you find that the future housing requirement for another next 5 years is say 50,000, but for 50,000 population you need a land of, if you consider 500 per hectare. So, you need 100 hectare of land. So, you might find that you have only 80 hectares of land in your hand, which is having a mix of high value, medium value or low value land. So, you might be working with your density, either you go with more density or you have a variable density, a combination of the low, medium or high based on the housing typology. Those kind of matching and correlation is required at the synthesis level after the analysis. So, based on that, what we do after this is some kind of scenarios. Scenario building. Now, what is a scenario? Scenario is basically the possible future position or possible future framework by which each and every stakeholders like private and public and the modalities can change. So, there could be various scenarios and no scenarios are sacrosanct or kind of a perfect scenarios. So, what we can do, we can make desired scenario of 2 or 3 or 4 scenarios based on the matching of the land, finance and housing typology. So, those kind of scenario we have to make, like so, this is the fifth stage what we are doing. So, in the scenario we are basically giving the broad idea of the housing strategy, that what kind of housing will be required typology wise, how much land is allocated per typology and how much finance is allocated. These two are very important resource required for the housing development, and varying these parameters, varying this allocation land and finance, we can make different kind of scenarios, at least 3 or 4, and then we select the scenario also. So, scenario based on some comparative analysis or based on some stakeholders consultation. Usually desired the scenarios can be grouped into a preferential manner 1, 2, 3, 4, and it can be presented to the city authority and the people of the city, and based on the result of the discussion and the stakeholders consultation, maybe one scenario could be chosen out of the developed scenarios. After the scenario building, what we do basically, we make the strategy for each and every housing typology in terms of their land, in terms of their finance, development control, their implementation mechanism, everything. And so this strategy based on the selected the chosen scenario will mention the land, finance, development control, implementation, and so on. So the strategy part will tell very clearly that what kind of housing typology will be there based on our scenario, how much land will be required, how to mobilize the resource, and how to implement, what kind of modalities will be there to implement the each type of housing typology, and then we make a action plan at the end. So action plan basically consisting the phasing, and not only phasing, apart from the phasing it will indicate each and every implementation part, like say organization, or agency who will implement the project based on the timeline. Another point you should remember that at the strategy level we need to link each and every typology of the housing with the current housing program like Pradhan Mantri Awas Yojana or technology submission. So those kind of input should come at the strategy level, that how we can link and how we can dovetail the available programs and the scenarios or the programs and the schemes with the our requirement. So those kind of strategic statements or strategic actions will come at the strategy level. So this is the sixth stage of our exercise, and then we are coming to the seventh stage, which is the final stage of the this exercise, which is called as a action plan. So following this exercise, following this methodology, starting from the study of the existing situation, we are making a vision, then analysis, and then synthesis, then making scenarios, making strategy, and making action plan. So this kind of exercise could be done for bigger cities, and at the end of the strategy planning or the strategy document for the housing, we will be able to see for each and every category of the housing, each and every pockets of the housing, like say by and large you will find for a city some part of the city will be already built up area having the core city housing, much congestion and much compact city in the center. Beyond that you will find gradually the city is going to be sparsely developed, and beyond that there is a immense scope of further development as a new areas of housing. So your strategy level, in your strategy should be very specific to the what are the strategy you are taking for the core city, compact city, and the congested areas which is already developed. Do you go for further development or all those areas, or we go for you do not do anything and you keep it like that, you preserve that area, or you go for another development for the new areas. So your treatment for the existing housing, existing already developed built up areas and the new housing areas will be different. So this particular element, that based on the this methodology at the strategy level, what kind of strategy could be taken for the existing city population, existing built up areas, existing housing typologies, and what kind of strategy could be taken for the new housing areas. Both are important because the people who are living in a existing city, they also needs constant upgradation, redensification and renewal. On the other hand, the new housing areas which you are basically going to plan, those are going to be new areas, and for the new areas those will accommodate the future population. For that you have to meticulously plan its land subdivision, land disposal, future network of the roads, infrastructure and its development, everything. So, in the next 2 lectures we will discuss these 2 elements. So, today we basically discussed the housing strategy formulation exercise, its fundamental stages. We told that it has 7 fundamental stages. The first stage is the study of the existing situation, second is the setting aims and objectives, what we told as the visioning exercise, third is the analysis. In the analysis we are analyzing various aspects of the housing typology, land, finance, everything, and the organization, and then we are making a synthesis of the analyzed data to make future scenarios. We are making few scenarios and identifying one final scenario, and based on the scenario we are making the development strategy for core city housing, new areas of housing and the special housing typology, new housing typology, and also we are making an action plan consisting the phasing plan and the agencies. That means the when it will be done and who will be delivering that particular projects or particular housing delivery. So, please keep this in your mind. So, in future we will show you a case study or some examples, but this is the generalized or simplified housing strategy formulation methodology which can be followed. So, next day we will discuss about the how the housing strategy can be taken for the core city or existing city development, and also the next lecture we will discuss that how the housing strategy could be different in the new areas of the housing where the vacant land or the existing green land can be converted to the future housing development in a sustainable manner. So, for today I thank you.